Hello, Biz Catalyst 360 and Northern Lights Publishing welcome you to RoundTable 360 with your host and moderator, Joseph Carabas. RoundTable 360 brings together people in the creative fields, dancers, thespians, poets, actors, musicians, authors, and others from across the globe in conversation about things that are relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Today's episode is Practice, the Art of Evolving. Creatives develop themselves as they develop their craft. As one evolves, so does the other. Can we evolve ourselves right out of the market? When have we practiced enough, and how would we know? Today's guests include magic realism and urban fantasy author Laura Korber, creativity guide, expressive and experimental artist Sarah Bowden, EU-based actor, voice artist, and model Sabine Rosbach, and a host of others. Stay with us and enjoy. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for taking part in another Roundtable 360. We're almost getting to the point where we know what we're doing. No. Today's session is on, oh, by the way, I'm Joseph Carabas, in case you didn't know. Anyway, today's session is about practice, the art of practice, the art of creation. And if we, as artists, whatever our media is, if we practice our craft, part of what happens, in my opinion, is that we evolve not only in our craft, but ourselves. I believe we grow as our craft matures. And that's the topic of today's discussion. Feel free to join us or not. Watch the video at least. I would like to open with something that happened to me very recently, and I believe it's related to practice. And then I'll be quiet for the rest of the session. Some of you, at least one of you, knows that I'm in a critique group. And I've been sending through my latest work in progress, Fane's Eye. And I've been sending through literally my rough drafts. Literally, I wrote it, I didn't clean it, I didn't spell check it, I didn't do anything. Just there it is. And I sent it through. And in the last critique meeting, some of the participants, I said to them, you guys do understand this is a very rough draft. This is really, raw. And they were shocked. They said, no, we thought this was ready to go. And I said out loud and hopefully more than anything to myself, I said, well, that could be because I practice. I feel I work hard at developing my craft. I take classes. I study, I read. However, I do not necessarily believe that means I'm a better person because I've worked hard at my craft. I still think I'm rather obnoxious. This is where everybody else jumps forward and says, no, Joseph, you're really kind of a sweet guy. Silence in the room. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. I'm working my ass off here, folks. Come on. Remember to tip your waitress. So I do believe that we develop our craft. It would be wonderful if we truly developed ourselves as well. What do you people believe? What are your thoughts of developing your craft? This is the kind of thing, and I nod to John Scullin, who said in a prep session, yeah, just because I watched Kung Fu videos for 6 hours on YouTube doesn't mean I have a black belt or whatever. Do you actually practice? When you learn something, when you study something, do you actually learn from it and about it? So please. Hi, Jen Lynn. The floor is now open. Mark, please.
My very first reaction to the question is, it's hard to imagine, and I'm going to use the term practitioner. It's hard to imagine working at becoming better as a practitioner um, without becoming a better person somehow, simply because I think working at becoming a better practitioner requires discipline. Um, and I, as a corollary thought, I guess I think if you work at becoming a better practitioner, apply more discipline and benefit from it. Um, and especially if it shows in your work, the only way you could not become a better person is if you become arrogant about what you've accomplished. And I suspect nobody, that would be true of no one in this room, I think.
Anne, what are we going to share, please?
Yes, I have many different thoughts on practice, but I will start with, I do think that practicing allows you to discover different parts of yourself. Meaning, if you look at the evolution of the beginner's mind, there's a raw organic spontaneity to that. And then as you practice, you try to hone your craft, you get better. And then sometimes I think there's an element of trying too hard and losing some of that natural organic spontaneity. So when I work, I try to weigh that so that I don't lose those original parts of myself that make me different and unique. However, practicing does allow you to hone that craft and to shape it and to mold it. So I go back to the first thing I said, which was the discovery of the inner parts of oneself. I think it's a journey. I think it's a learning journey, and there's no choice but to grow and evolve and discover parts of yourself emotionally that help you, or maybe a few times hinder you to create.
Thank you. Um, Definite food for thought there. Clarabelle, please.
Yeah, so my first thought as we were in our intro was I think practice is something that it's never finished. Ideally, I think a creator is never done practicing. Ideally, you should be practicing throughout your entire creative life. Hopefully, it's a continual process of trying to always become better, always learn new things. I don't think it's a process that has an end, nor should it have an end necessarily.
Very good. Thank you. Ken. You're muted, Ken.
Thank you. There are two things. One is that we have to practice the skill, but as soon as we do that, we also have to practice the quality of skill of practicing. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to tell a quick story. When I was in college, one of my roommates, suite mates, who went on, by the way, just so you understand this, he went on to be a world-class astrophysicist. But when we were in our junior year, he brought a grand piano, installed it in his bedroom, which meant that he had to sleep in the closet in order to have room for this grand piano. But he did, and he practiced and practiced and practiced. Then in senior year, he came back and he still had his piano. And he said, "Ken, come in and listen to me play." And I did. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "You have practiced to the point of being technically excellent, but you have no soul." And he looked at me, tears in his eyes. And he said, that's what I spent all summer in Paris studying, and that's what my teacher told me. Okay, so if you practice, but you do not practice with a self-awareness and a orientation to changing self, then practice becomes mechanical. We can become very good at, for example, torturing people. Kafka in the penal colony came to my mind when you're talking about practice, which tells you how much I enjoy practicing, right? But we can practice becoming great torturers. Okay, but does that mean that we have evolved in some positive way, or that we have grown as people? I think not. So I think that's those two separate things: the skill we practice and the self-awareness that goes with that practice. If we practice self-awareness.
Thank you, Ken. Your anecdote reminded me of Tori Amos, who had a one-room apartment in London, or somewhere very close to London, for a while. And in her one-room apartment, she had a grand piano, which she slept under, because apartments in London are phenomenally expensive. And that's, you put a grand piano in a one-room apartment, you don't have much room for anything else. And the other thing it brought to mind was Jack Nicholson in 5 Easy Pieces, about being an incredibly proficient and gifted pianist who felt nothing when he played. Tremendous movie if you ever want to go see it. Sabine, please. Sabine?
Well, I agree with what Ken said, that you have to, let's say, you have to practice to learn the form through which you, or in which you express whatever your art is, but then you have to add yourself to that, because otherwise it's lifeless. I find that I often find that with music. With singing more so than with music. You can sing very correctly and can have a wonderful voice, but when there's no soul, it's just empty. So far so good. But then I think, as far as I am concerned, sorry, I'm a bit slow with my speech today. I think for me, I am at a point now where practice for me equals experience, becoming more experienced through what I'm doing. So I don't know, maybe I think gaining experience, exercising your profession is in itself is practice every time. I mean, every time. Every rehearsal, every show, every shooting day on a film set for me is practice, because I have learned more, I have gained experience, and I can use that again to add to whatever I do next. So I think, to just practice it in the sense of do it. Not necessarily learning something new in terms of skill but gaining experience and using that. And I think this is tying in when we talk about evolving as a human being at the same time. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Sabine. Zhenlin?
Yeah, I just, from what I'm gathering and picking up from the answers, thank you all for letting me be late. But is that in our pursuit of practice and in trying to become better, we often forget to let curiosity lead the way, where we're not necessarily trying to learn to do something better, but rather building on what we already know by doing it differently.
Can you go a bit more into that, Jen?
When we have a skill or we're practicing a skill, we tend to step into guidelines about what that skill is supposed to look like, sound like, be like. So we follow the steps in up the rung of the ladder. When we can allow our curiosity to lead our skill set, we're just looking at it curiously, and we're building off of something that we've learned. But for me, I then allow my curiosity to build upon how I can do it differently. So I'm not in a pursuit of betterment. I'm always in a pursuit of creativity and innovation and doing it differently. Can the differently look better? Can it be closer to the pinnacle of what that's supposed to look like? Absolutely. But I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves in practicing something. When I played saxophone, we'd have to go down to when I practiced how I was supposed to hold it, how I was supposed to play it, how my embouchure was supposed to be, how wet my reed was supposed to be. I could play, right? Technically, like they were saying before. But when I just let it go and just got curious with what sounds I could make and what beautiful things could come forth between my union with this beautiful instrument, then it was something different rather than skilled, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I'm going to I'm going to see if I can rephrase it a bit. Please feel free to correct me. For you, and I'm sure for others, creativity is an act of exploration.
Yes.
And it's when you're speaking about playing the saxophone. By the way, I play alto and soprano, so I'm right with you. I'm good. I play at them. Can't say I really play them. I'm not David Sanborn yet. Or Nelson Rangel. If you've ever heard Nelson Rangel, boy, can that guy blow out a tune. Anyway, I apologize, folks. Eric Ries said, whenever we practice, we are learning to experiment. So I think that's also, I like that concept that when I'm practicing, I am experimenting. Can I push it further? And will it still work? So the concept of exploration makes a lot of sense to me. Ken, please.
Yeah, I want to follow up with Jenlin, but first I want to follow up with Sabanet, because, Sabanet is a performing artist, an actress, and she takes part in something we call rehearsals. And she also practices. And I was hoping that she would help us distinguish between those two things. But then we could also talk about it with music, because when I was young and I did play in an orchestra, I would practice and then we would have rehearsal. And to me, those are two very interesting sides of the same thing. But while I'm also on the subject here, I also think that ultimately, when we talk about practice in the arts, okay, and we are at once doing something very strange. We're doing something very strange because at the very point that we're trying to achieve some kind of perfection, some kind of platonic ideal, we are also simultaneously, if we're going to be worth doing it, trying to free ourselves so that we can do something different. And there is this wonderful duality, if you will, between art, a praxis in art, and creativity in art that doesn't exist, say, for example, if you're going to be a brain surgeon. If you're going to be a neurosurgeon, it isn't about being creative, how you pull that little tumor out. It's how precise you can do it exactly. But for us, that's not what our goal is. The goal is to find within ourselves something to then put into that Platonic ideal. And that, to me, is what makes it art different, makes art worthwhile. But then, Sabine, would you please try and explore the difference between rehearsal and practice for me?
I'd say there is none. Even though there are rehearsals and rehearsals. There is one period when you begin to work with each other as a team, as a group, or a one-to-one. In the beginning, it's and there I summarize I repeat what Jen Lin and Joseph said: exploration, experiment, very often improvisation for us. If we are stuck, we use improvisation to find something new, to open up new horizons, new energies that can flow between us. So in the first stages of rehearsal, of course, we have material, but in the beginning, you start exploring that, whatever you were given. So that's not really, I don't know if you can call it practice. We are looking for that which works between the artists who are present and who are playing with each other, and which goes in line with the director's vision and so on. And then we come if we come to later stages in rehearsal, we come to a point in rehearsal where we agree on a certain way of doing something. And we have to do that because otherwise we are playing something different every night. So there has to be a basic agreement on certain actions, on certain movements, on a certain timing, etc. And then it is practicing that. And that again is like learning lines. It's just close your eyes and do it. And then again, when this is in place, you come back. When this is like automatically in running, you can come back again and add a little grain here, a little something different there. That doesn't mean that it's set in stone, right? So that's, now I do not know really where does rehearsal start and practice, or where does exploration stop and rehearsal start? Does rehearsal equal practice? I would say so.
Very good. Mark, please.
Thank you. Actually, I was enjoying listening and what it was compelling me to think about. I worked for a while, and this is on the subject of, I'll characterize it as practicing too much. But I worked for a while for a gentleman who had a PhD in theoretical linguistics, and he wrote his doctoral dissertation on the semantics of Dutch verbs. And I was tasked with writing a writing manual for the company that we both worked for. And this guy would mark up absolutely everything I wrote with a blue pencil, which is why in my Batman mug here, you will never find the blue pencil. They now give me hives. But what occurred to me while I was listening was, I never saw that man write anything. I never knew that man to sit down and write anything. So I wonder if, um, depending on what your intentions are, if you can get yourself to a technical point at which you think you know everything. And so, as Jenlin was suggesting, curiosity and experimentation are lost. And also on the subject of music, um, and I think there's some overlap, Sabanet, in what you were saying. You have the knowledge of music as a language, and then you have the application of technical facility on the instrument. And those to me are very different things. And one of the guitar teachers I had referred to familiarity on the instrument as idiomuscular memory. And I think when you get to a point at which your knowledge of the instrument, the facility of your idiomuscular memory, and your knowledge of the music of language, I don't know, mesh, combine something, then you can do different things. And they may not even have to be drastic things. But I was struck when you mentioned in particular, Sabanet, about the director. If someone is improvising for the sake of example, or even playing a written melody on, for example, the electric guitar, you can do different things even in the same piece of music, like hold a note for more or less time, bend a note or not, use your left hand for vibrato or not. So anyway, that's all of that stuff was going through my head. So thank you for letting me get it out.
Thank you, Mark. John, please.
For me, practicing is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable for a while. It's just I'm trying to currently get back into drawing. I used to do it all the time in school, just drawing the margins of my books. And I just stopped. And so I've been trying to get back into it. And the frustration or like putting yourself down of saying like, you know how to do this, you can just start doing it again. It's not there. And so you need to keep pushing past that and practicing and saying these lines are not going to be perfect the first time you do this until you start doing it more and more and getting more comfortable. And when that comfort is there, you can start now refining that skill set into what Jenlin said earlier. When watching tutorials on like techniques and stuff like that, put your own spin into it, make it yours, because it's going to stick with you more naturally when you make it more fun for yourself like that. So there was a class I was watching, and the teacher said, look, you're going to follow along with this to learn the software, but don't do what I'm doing exactly. Don't do the same colors. Don't make the same shapes of trees and stuff like that. Make it the thing that you want it to be. This is just showing you the techniques so you can go home and do this yourself until you get better at it. So
if I could just jump in for 1 second, John, I want to thank you for making me aware of Midjourney in our last conversation. If that is an addiction, I'm hooked.
Yeah, it's too easy to make really awesome stuff, but it's also inspiring to like take it and make your own from it.
Yep. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Midjourney, that is Mark O'Brien and John Scully. Send your checks to them. Thank you, guys.
Checks in the mail.
Please.
I wanted to think about practice. There's also the impact of other people's reactions to your work and whether that can affect you adversely or not. You were talking about critique groups earlier, Joseph, and that whether you accept the comments that are made, because I've been in a couple of critique groups where a couple of people have made similar comments, and that writer has just not wanted to take on board those comments whatsoever, that they're not prepared to have any impact or any views actually affect what they want to do, and whether that's the right thing or not.
Rick, if I may respond to Liz, just give me a second here. Speaking for myself, Liz, I know that I'm a competent writer. I know that I write well, but I do not consider myself a good writer. I consider myself a practicing author. I work at it. So when anybody says to me, wow, that was amazing what you wrote, my response is to be thankful. And it's my nature to go, what about it was so great? How did it really, what was it in there that moved you the way it did? Because when I find out what I did that people responded to both positively and negatively, I can work on it. So hearing people praise my work, I enjoy it. Yes, of course I do, because I'm an ego. I have an ego. Boy, was that a Freudian slip. Yes, I am the ego of the world. I have an ego, so I do enjoy it, of course. But at the same time, I personally learn more when people tell me this didn't work. Here's how I think it could work better. Because that enables me to develop, to practice my craft. And that's just me. And I'm a very craft-driven person. Even people who don't like my writing, when they review it, have stated, but the technique is amazing. The crafting is incredible. So you don't like what I wrote? Yeah, life goes on. Do you not like the way I wrote it? Tell me why. That's what I'm curious about. Rick, thank you for indulging me, please.
I think, can I make a comment?
Yes.
Am I muted?
No.
Oh, Laura,
Oh,
please.
okay.
Hope you don't mind, Rick. Laura's jumping in.
No.
Oh, if you're doing things in a certain order, I will back off.
Well,
Go
Rick
ahead.
is next. You don't mind, Rick, if Laura jumps in?
Of course.
I didn't
Go ahead,
know
sure.
you were going in a certain order. I apologize.
Okay.
I
Go
thought
ahead.
people were signaling somehow.
And Laura. But please, what were you going to say?
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Anyway, when you introduced this topic, Joseph, and I was listening, and you were talking about how the act of practicing could influence character in a positive way. And my immediate response was, there's just too many assholes out there that are very good at their craft. I mean, I was thinking Neil Gaiman, you know, and so so the whole time I've been listening to you all, I've been thinking that there is an interaction between the person's personality and the way they do practice. If you're a fearful person, you might really focus on those splinter skills because they're very concrete. Are you hitting the right notes? And you might be afraid to take the step of trying to, create a little more. If you're a very bold person, you might just jump right there on the piano and start banging away and be sloppy but creative. But it seems to me that the theme that we've been talking about this entire time is the humility of somebody who assumes that they don't know, and that every practice is a learning experience, and that they're never really going to get to the end of it. They're always going to be humbly experimenting. But there are people out there that humility isn't there anymore. And they could turn into somebody like the professor with the blue pen, or the star, the person who it becomes all about them as a as you know, they really get into the vanity of feeling like they've succeeded. So anyway, that's my observation of we've been talking really about humility and practice, interacting with character. If there's some humility involved in there, that's how the practice can improve what you're doing without you becoming an asshole.
So you've given me a new goal to practice without becoming an asshole. Thank you. I appreciate that. Please.
And thank you for letting me butt in. I wasn't sure what the system was. I won't do it again.
Doesn't bother me.
Rick, please. Yes.
Sure. Again, this is, I think, another fascinating topic that you've chosen, and it sort of, makes me sort of bounce around for lots of different things. I think we've been talking about, there's a difference between technical skill and whether it's soul or inspiration or creativity, that factor X. Why was Elvis Presley such an incredible singer? He just had that, factor X to his voice. It also makes me think about what a musician told me a long time ago on the topic of practice. I'm a lawyer, and he said, Rick, doctors and lawyers are the only people who get paid to practice, which was, I thought, humorous, but there's a lot of truth to that. And it sort of makes me think there is a difference, whether it's superficial or not. I'll let other people tell me who are smarter than me, but I think there's a difference between performing artists and creative artists. Performing artists, perform. They're singers, actors. While creative artists have to come up with something out of nothing, or although they steal and borrow, so it's not really out of nothing. And so it seems to me that performing artists, by practicing and rehearsing, can get better and better, or really hone their skills. While creative artists, I think, while we have a skill we have to do, and we certainly can improve it and learn, ideas can run dry. I can point to all sorts of fantastic rock and roll songwriters who had brilliant songs in the 60s and 70s, and then they just dried up. Nothing more creative coming out of them. They could still perform very well. So I think there's sort of an issue of talent and inspiration. And I think, as we've said before, sometimes by practicing, you can chase down inspiration rather than just waiting for the arrow to hit you, being shot by a muse out of the dark. So I think there is a discovery, and that you can find through practice. But as far as how that affects a person, well, I think it kind of depends. You would hope that the more you practice, the better you get, no matter whether you're performing or a creative artist, the better person you become. But as Mark said, it doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes with success comes nothing but blatant arrogance. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Ken. Donna, please unmute and share.
Hi. Lots of thoughts running through my head. There was an author a long time ago who said, I'm only going to go through this life once and I want to make the most of it. And what I think he meant was nobody was going to see the world quite like him ever again, and he wanted to make the most of it. And I think that's a common denominator with any creative. We want to show the world that we've been here and share our individuality the best we can. What I did, deciding that I wanted to write mysteries when I was 10, my whole life was in practice in a way to do what I loved and show my individuality. And when I was a little girl, I used to describe things to myself just for fun. You know, what did the trash can smell like? What's that rabbit doing across the road? And uh, it was fun. And now that's my product, my viewpoint. And what I'm trying to do is describe things the way I see them as accurately as possible. And what that sometimes means for any author or anyone expressing creatively themselves. Sometimes you'll hit on something universal and other people say, wow, that's something I saw too. And our brains connect. It's a unique thing and a wonderful thing. And as for practice, that was one way I practiced for what I wanted to do. But later on, when I was actually seriously getting into it, the advice was write something and set it aside. And then a month or 5 days or whatever it was later, you go back and improve it. Well, I did that for decades. I finally got to the point where when I went back to it, I only changed a word or so. That was when I decided, okay, this is the best I can do. And fortunately, it was saleable. And I had contracts and still do it on my own terms. But what I do now, all the background, the framework for what I do has been internalized so that I automatically know the technique. I know what I'm doing. So when my drafts are far along, almost ready to publish, I go back one more time and I just make it sound like me. And that's my
Thank you, Donna. Ken, I want to jump the queue a little bit because I asked Anne a very specific question. Would you be willing to have her respond? Please, Anne.
Okay, and thank you, Joseph. So I'm an artist. My practice may be a little different because I'm in obviously a different creative field. And when I'm in my artist mode or when I do practice, there's two sides. And as people have said, there's a curiosity side, there's an emotional side. So there is technique. I could sit here and just blend colors. And that's all I do all day is how do I take one paint and another paint and create a color? That's technique, and the same thing with brush strokes. And all of these techniques go to create a finished product. And I guess I could relate it to writing where, there's grammar, there's semantics, and then you come to your signature style. And that is a different practice. That's a different practice. And in the beginning, I said that organic part of yourself, that sometimes if you practice paint or you look at another artist or you take a lesson, you start to almost self-critique. And then the emotion, the creativity, or the talent just gets either suppressed or sidelined into what somebody has taught you. And so it's hard sometimes to take that, to get the signature of one's own creativity or style. So it breaks down into two different aspects. You could relate it to acting, where you could have several different actors look at the same part. They're all good, but they may read the same lines differently. And that's that touch of you, or like Joseph, when you write, there's that style or that signature that's yours and yours alone. And sometimes you have to be able to preserve that, and you have to save that. I hope I answered your question, Joseph.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. You've given me a lot of other questions, but I'm gonna ask Ken to share while I ruminate.
You can chew your cud while I talk. What I'm struck by, I wanted to go back to your critique group, and then what Ann was just talking about. It seems to me that there's this fascinating process that goes on socially within the arts as well. Some of us exist in isolation. I think it's Cormac McCarthy, for example, just doesn't interact with anyone, anyone in the world practically. And then there are people like you, Joseph, who belong to critique groups. I have a poetry group that we meet every week. And so the question that strikes me is for all of us is how much do we want that outside? How much do we not want it? Some of these things, like when you're talking about stage performance, unless you're going to do one person plays, you have to be interacting with people. But do they? Do all actors equally interact? Are they, or does some of them exist in their own little bubble and really have no interest in rubbing against the other talent on the stage? I'm reminded once, I saw, I don't know if I've said this before on the show, but I saw Equus with Richard Burton and Anthony Perkins, two Broadway productions. And one was incomparably better than the other because Richard Burton came out on the stage to be Richard Burton. He built a cage around himself. Anthony Perkins came out to be his character and he interacted. And I was just blown away by the difference that made. Burton recited the lines, but so what? So, how much do we make ourselves our own little bubble? And how much do we have to? Because, if we allow the world to push on us too much, then doesn't our writing or our painting become like everybody else's? So there's this fine dynamic that goes on that I'm fascinated by. How much do I want your critique? But I want some. And if you only tell me it's wonderful, as your group was telling you, I'd say find another group because they no longer are invested in me as a person, as my growth. They're not giving to me. They're just patting me on the head. I'll go somewhere else where people want to shove something up my rear end instead.
Well, as a technical note, just as a point of reference, they are giving me very good growable feedback. So I will be staying with them until they kick me out, which may be in a week or two. However, it was the fact that in the midst of their comments and excellent critique, they offered that to me. That, wow. I mean, it was very flattering. I'm not sure. I think Laura, who had to leave, I think she was the one who, made the statement about what I would call the evil wizard. Incredibly talented at their magic, but they're sons of bitches, and you want to be around them, So maybe that's, to use her example of Neil Gaiman, and I'm not saying anything pro or con Neil Gaiman. I'm just saying I've known people who are at what I consider just penultimate. I don't want to be around them. I had the horrible experience of meeting Edwin Teller, one of my heroes, a brilliant mathematical physicist. And I was in the lecture hall, and my God, I was just waiting for this guy to share. And he was the most violent hawk. We have to kill the communists. We have to bomb Russia. And I could not put his brilliance in mathematics with his brilliance or his violent nature. So I'm well aware that we have evil wizards. I certainly hope I never become one. Thank you, Ken. Jenlin, please. Jenlin?
Um, there's a word that always comes up around the betterment, self-improvement, practicing skill. And it's mm, what's you said it earlier, and you were alluding to it, right? Oh, humility. What does humbleness have to do with it? I'm always curious people's thoughts on humility, and why it is so entwined with being skillful, um, and or not, or only being skillful, right? What does humility have to do with it?
Jenlin, you've done an excellent job of confusing me. Could you go over that again?
You're muted.
Of course I was. No, in any conversation, it feels, whether it's around skill or betterment, development, practice, and all of those things, humility always seems to come into the conversation. And so I'm always curious why. What does humility have to do with it?
I'll toss that one to Sabine, who's one of the most humble and impressive practitioners I know. Please.
I was just thinking, well, what is this? It is a very good question. Very genuine. It's a very good question. What does it mean being humble and being good at your craft, or being successful even, or being whatnot? Maybe it's hard to define. Everyone can define it for themselves, maybe. Maybe humility shows, or I feel that someone is humble when I am next to that person, or working with her or with him, and we're doing something. We're working together, and we're eye to eye somehow. I can't find to explain it better. That's that for me, anyways. And that brings me into another note that I've made, an observation that I've made. Artists who are extremely successful, and there's a third party also coming into play, that's the audience or your readers, I think, that are extremely popular or extremely good, and had really good luck and have good skills and so on, but who do not take any critique, who seem to be immune to any critique or something like this, are often, I've known from experience, I've known and worked with artists like this, and these are often colleagues or who polarize in the outside world, who are outside of themselves, who polarize. Maybe Ken can say much more about this. It's just an observation that I had.
I've got a thought to throw in, but I don't want to interrupt anybody.
Go ahead.
Mark, are you okay? If I jump in, you're next in line.
Yes, I am positively okay.
Yeah, so what I would wonder is humility in the arts, is it the difference between confidence and arrogance? That was the first thought that came to my mind, because when I think of humility in artistic and creative pursuits, to me, it means being able to receive criticism And you may decide that you don't agree with it or you don't agree with all of it and you put some of it aside and you keep going, but you're not reactive, you're not angry, you're not trying to make yourself better than others. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
So you kind of receive it, you move on. You know, you might decide you want to take it, but ultimately you might decide that you're happy with your work how it is. And confidence and presenting yourself confidently as an artist is very different from the arrogance that I think we were alluding to earlier with how some people get really into their egos and become very difficult to work with and very difficult to talk to because they will not consider an outside perspective. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a question that popped into my mind. I wonder what the group would think about that. Is humility the difference between confidence and arrogance?
Excellent points, Clara. I actually, when you put that frame in, I actually went, "Oof, that's good." I'm gonna, Mark, you had your hand up first, and then I'll get back to Sabine. So please, Mark, share.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually going to start with humility because I think it ties to what I actually wanted to talk about, which was prompted by Anne and Ken. The way I view humility is if something that I've done really resonates with somebody and they say, oh, that's really, I want to be grateful for that. But by the same token, I don't want to overthink it because I'm afraid I'll break it. So if that's just what if whatever it is I've done comes naturally to me or something, I'm all right with that. But I don't want to overthink it. So I want to quote this directly. So let me just jump back here. In your description for this session, Joseph, you asked the question, can our evolving selves evolve us out of the market? It may be because I don't have to depend on the creative work that I do for a living. So when I'm writing creatively, I'm not thinking for any given market. But I wrote, when Ann was talking, I wrote down what somebody has taught you. And then when Ken was talking about what we may or may not want to accept, depending on, and I'm sorry if I'm paraphrasing badly, Ken, but whatever our creative intentions are, I would find that the idea of writing for a specific market was too limiting. And I have no idea if that's correct or not, nor do I have any idea if the way I think about humility is correct or even healthy for that matter. But that's what I think about it.
Very good, and I would like to cycle back to that. But Rick, you had your hand up, please.
Sure. I just wanted to comment that I thought Clarabelle's observation that humility is really a indication of confidence is actually brilliant, and I think that the root word of humility is or so close to humble, and in English we consider a humble person. You think of a peasant and they're humble before their their lord or whoever's above them, but humility is different than being humble. It is an issue of just being confident because every person that I know who has humility is very confident in themselves. That's why they are confident to listen to criticism, confident to listen to another point of view. So I just thought it was just a brilliant observation. I just had to comment on that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm going to bring in people that are considered legends. I saw Itzhak Perlman on stage with 3 other violinists, one who admitted he was a fiddler. He didn't consider himself a violinist. But there was a Jean-Luc Ponty. If you don't know, don't worry about it, except you should go listen to him. Doug, and I forgot his last name, but he is a Cajun fiddler. That's his style, Cajun fiddling. And the other one was a style called, it's out of the Appalachians. I forget the exact name. Anyway, they were all playing together. They were, improvising with each other. But what I really was just blown away by was Perlman could mimic everybody else's style. Not everybody could play the Perlman style. And then in the interlude there, he said, well, I don't think I said I'm any better than them. It's just that I've spent my life studying technique. So I know how to do stuff very quickly and very rapidly. It comes very naturally to me. And I think, Jen Lin also had to leave, but I think that has part to do with it, because when I play the piano or sax or guitar, at a certain point in time, my fingers just know what to do. I stop thinking about it. And that's idiomuscular memory, or as we sometimes call it, strong, stupid guy. But I think that's what happens is it becomes automatic. I know that when I practice writing, and I want to go back to that with the other disciplines, with the graphic media and being an artist, a painting artist. When I practice, I have a goal for my practice in my mind. I want to create a rhythm in a sentence. And okay, that didn't get it. Okay, that got it. What did I do that time that got it? Can I do that again? Okay, I did it again. Okay, and I might go from 1 out of 10 to 7 out of 10 to 10 out of 10. And then I can go, okay, I've got that. Sometimes when I sit down to work and I'm not getting anything, I just pull up exercises to do. And I pump myself through exercises. Coming up with metaphors, coming up with similes, create a paragraph, do something purely in dialogue. And by doing that type of practicing, all of a sudden something will break free. And then I can't stop creating. And I had that same thing happen at the piano. I'll run scales, and all of a sudden the scales will just go nuts, and Susan will come in and she'll go, what is that? I've never heard you play that. Yeah, you're never going to hear it again either. So I wish you had a recording going. And the last thing I want to offer, and then I promise I will be quiet. I know people, and I will put myself in this category. I'm very confident in my craft, but I also recognize the limits of my craft. I'm not a poet. I'm not a journalist. I've seen some journalists who do amazing fiction. That's incredible to me. I've seen the Scottish comedian whose name I can't remember. He can do drama like it's nobody's business. But he does comedy. And I've seen people who are good dramatists who can't do comedy for crap. I think it's an entirely different set of muscles. Sabine, you are a performing artist, so please feel free to correct me.
No, absolutely right. I just wanted to throw in, here's an example where practice is needed in my craft when it comes to physicality, for example. If I adopt a character's physicality, or I explore and I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is the thing, and this is the physicality we want. For example, someone is walking with a crutch, or someone has if I have to play you, let's take that as an example, I have to learn to walk like Joseph walks. I have to learn to move in space as you do. And that is pure practice. It's like, do it again, get it wrong, try again, get it wrong again, get better at getting it wrong until you get it right, right? So here comes the impulse of doing the Joseph walk, see what that does to my character. Wow. And I feel, and everyone agrees, that's it, very good. Then comes the practice, right? And that becomes automatic, just what you mentioned, what you said. Because if I don't, I do my Sabine walk, I do my Sabine gestures, right? That's just not, I don't want to play Sabine, I want to play Joseph.
Yes, very good. Ken offered if the comedian I was thinking of was David Tennant. Is that correct, Ken? And David Tennant is an example. He's been in Hamlet and he can do Doctor Who, and he does them both beautifully. But no, the gentleman I'm thinking of is out of Glasgow. He's got a really beautiful Glaswegian accent. Sorry, I'm pulling up a blank. Anyway, anybody else? We're right at about an hour, so we can go to the full half hour coming up, or we can quit here. I'm ready to go for the next full hour or full half hour because I do have things to do. I have to go practice. Ken, please. Unmute, Ken.
Gee, I'm forgetting that today for some reason. We have another nominee in the chat room, Robbie Coltrane. Was that who you had in mind?
No, also incredibly gifted, but and he passed away, unfortunately.
This is a great game. We should have this game every episode. We should have some game like this going on. Who can figure out what was on Joe's mind?
He was very often referred to as the Robin Williams to the rest of the world. And Robin Williams was another one. He could do like
fabulous
business, and then he could do drama. Like, oh my God.
Which brings up this very interesting thing that I was kind of wondering about. Creativity, its range. Now, you don't write poetry, I do. We overlap, but I don't write science fiction. You write wonderful science fiction. You practice the rhythm of speech, and my editor comes back to me and says things like, "Ken, do you realize you've written this entire book in iambic pentameter?" And I say, "Duh, yeah, of course I do." So, I mean, we have our talents. I guess that's what I'm saying. We have our talents. Some of us, perhaps we would have been better off had we been born in some other time. I wonder what my talents might have been in another time and place. I could see myself coming up with some absolutely wonderful witchcraftery kind of ceremonies that I could perform, stumbling around the fire or something. But I'm wondering, how do we figure out where our talents focus? What is that part of the process of evolving that, when I was like 8 years old at summer camp, I wanted to act. I wanted to be on the stage. Now I write plays, but you couldn't get me on the stage, even if you performed my play, and they'd have to drag me up there to take a bow for it. So, how do we evolve that way?
How do we choose our medium? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, basically, yeah. How does our medium choose us?
Okay, I'm gonna go in the reverse order of what I have on my screen. Mark, how did you choose your medium?
I don't think I did. I actually felt like it chose me. And that was going to be my response to Ken. Uh, I I have no idea why, but I've just always known that I was a writer. I wasn't always as good as I wanted to be. I certainly had a lot to learn, but I also think that there was um, response and encouragement involved. I would say that I did not, and maybe could not, even begin to take myself seriously as a writer until I was 28, because I was 28 when I decided to finally go to college and got positive feedback from people I respected. And I thought, wow, maybe I haven't been fooling myself for all this time. So, you have the inclination, you get that kind of feedback, you have faith in the people who give you that feedback, and then I'm going to say discipline again. If you have the discipline and the inclination, you work at it. And I just want to add that I think the determination to work at it is respect for the gift, because otherwise the gift is wasted.
Thank you. Sabine, your hand's up.
Yeah, I think just thinking back, and it took me about 40 years to see that I had never finished playing. I just had to cultivate that. And yes, also from the outside world, who said, "Well, this is good. Why don't you do that? My God." Yes, but also it's almost like an impulse. Now, if I'm not working, I am looking for every possibility to play, be it with my bank manager. It's just it's almost like an impulse. I can't not play. But it took me a very long time and a lot of life lived in my Sabine form to realize that. I had always been playing since I was 4 years old, but it not consciously. I did not become conscious of it until I was in the beginning of my 40s.
Okay, Mark, I see that you have your hand up, but I wanna jump over to Anne. How did you choose your
Oh,
medium?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, that's okay. It's all right.
Well,
It's okay, Mark. Relax. Please, Anne.
yes. And I have this opening line at 4 years old. Don't ask me what I was doing in my parents' garage, but I had a crayon and I sort of drew all over the walls. And I was disciplined for that, meaning I was told when I go to school, I had to practice academics. I wanted to take art classes. I'm kind of giving away my age, but the only thing that I was really allowed to do was take a home ec class. So I showed my creativity through cooking. And it was a series of times in my life where I either had unpleasant news, I had to mature, and I just fought for it and said, I've got to do something for me. But I did know all along, and they'd catch me playing, and I'd be either creating something, finding something, and making it different. So I feel that creativity is born. And somebody else made a comment, I think the gentleman just left, who's a lawyer, and said he finds creativeness in practicing law. And so I think we all have it in us. It's just when and what brings it out is probably different for all of us. But mine was suppressed.
Very good. Mark, do you mind if I go over to Donna? She's only spoken once.
I
Please,
do not.
please. Unmute Donna.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of people in the arts have decided young, and they may not know why, but I was very stubborn. My apprenticeship was very long, but it was the thing that gave me pleasure. And as an adult, what I realized is something that is pretty general. I think to be happy, the job that you choose should use as many of your talents as you can find. And for me, it was very lucky that what I chose suited my inclinations very, very well. I like quirky little details. I like to solve problems. I like to play with words. I like to create puzzles and express myself to other people accurately. I mean, it's a very useful thing for everybody. And so that's one of the things that I learned after the fact. But I think, it was just luck in a way, but also something that, as you say, you're born with. And when I was exposed to Rex Stout when I was 10, I thought, wow, that looks like fun. And I never changed my.
Mark, please.
I actually got up. I thought of this and got up right after Sabina was speaking about being in your 40s. So I will tell you that I was always a fan of comic books. I've actually written about this in places. But the summer I was 10, I had a cousin who shared with me his Marvel comic books. And I knew at age 10, when I read Stan Lee's writing, that was it. And it was very different. And of course, I loved the illustrations in the comic books, but that's not why I read them. I read them because of what Stan Lee was doing with that language. So, Anne was reluctant to give away her age, even though she didn't. And everyone knows that today is my birthday. So I will tell you, I'm 71 years old today, and this month, my first graphic novel was published. You can call this what you want. It's considered to be a graphic novel. This is a comic book. This is a comic book. And there was just no way I was going to quit on that. And it's intended to be serialized, and there are more in the works. So I guess the bottom line there is don't quit.
Very good, Mark, and big congratulations on getting that published.
Thank you.
Clara,
I feel like a kid in a candy shop.
you should. You should.
I do.
If you're a kid who happens to get a scotch, that's okay too.
There you go.
Clara, please. How did you choose poetry? And was that your first choice? Was poetry your first choice? Because poetry is just challenging to me.
That is a good question. So I write both. So I do both poetry and fiction. I'm trying to remember. I think I started technically with fiction, if you can call what a 4 or 5-year-old writes fiction. Because that was when I started. I think, like many of the other creatives in this group, I don't ever recall a conscious decision to choose to become a writer. It just very naturally happened. I was drawn to it from as early as I can remember. Pretty much as soon as I was able to read and write, even in the barest sense, I was trying to put books together. So it feels like it chose me, as many people say.
Thank you, Ken. I'm sorry, not Ken. Rick. I apologize, Rick. Unmute, Rick. While Rick is finding the unmute button, I'll share my origin story. Not anywhere near as interesting as Wolverine's origin story, I'm sure. And this is something that I hope Sabine will chuckle quietly at. When I was in fourth grade, and I do not know what prompted me to start doing this, I wrote little plays to perform in front of the class. And I asked my teacher, Mr. Woodbury, would it be okay if I did this? She looked at it, she read it, it was one page. And she just kind of chuckled and said, sure, that'd be very great. So she actually blocked off 30 minutes on a Friday afternoon. And the laughter was amazing. The intended laughter was incredible. There was also other laughter, but the intended laughter was amazing. So I said, can I do this again? And she said, sure. I did it 2 weeks later. Great intended laughter. Didn't realize I was writing comedy, but that prompted me to write this first thing. Batman and Robin, the TV show, was big at the time, showing you my age, folks. So I created a parody called Flat Man and Ribbon. And they had to save, I forget who they had to save, but they had to save her because her living bra and living girdle were attacking her. And, that was my thing. And the other teachers came in and they were laughing with their class. I'm on a roll. The next couple of weeks later, I did another one. Whisper, you couldn't, pin drops. It was dead. I realized what it's like to die on stage. So I said, okay, acting's not for me, because oh God, the hurt was amazing. But I turned to writing. I love to read. I read everything and anything I could get. And the writing took me to places nothing else could. Nothing, I could sit in a chair and read a book and be on Mars with John Carter, be in Africa with Tarzan. I could be at the galaxy's edge with the Lensman and Aricia. I could be under the sea with Jules Verne. I could be on the moon with H.G. Wells, or in the far future. So that's what locked me into writing. And I do write some poetry. Strangely enough, some of it gets published. But Rick, are you able to share now your origin story?
Well, I won't say my origin story, but that'd be too boring. But basically, I think I'm not different than anybody else. When we were kids, we all knew we wanted to do this. Now, when you're a kid, you also make mistakes as to what you want to do. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a police officer. I want to be, a rock and roll star. And I had my, phase for that because I could play the piano about this well. And of course, I had no real talent, so that didn't go anywhere. I could write some songs, but no real talent there. But I always wanted to be a writer from the age of 3, and so it's finding that you could actually do something, which I suppose is the difference between wanting and talent. And I may have mentioned this before. I have a niece who's a published novelist with Harper and Row in literary genre, and I said, Nikki, as you know, lots of people want to be a writer. It's not that you want to be a writer, you have to be a writer. And she looked at me and goes, yeah, that's right, Uncle Rick. So, in that 1 minute, that's sort of my origin story. I think, it would be a nice topic sometime for us to discuss how we learned that we could actually maybe do what we love to do, but that'd be an entire different topic. But those are the only comments I wanted to make. But thank you for letting me make them.
Thank you. We got about 4 minutes left. Anybody want to share a closing comment before I wrap us up?
I would just add a note. I would just add a note of gratitude. Every time we do this, I learn. So thank you.
Excellent. That is the goal. So then, thank you all. He looks into the camera. See how clever he is? Sabine, I'm getting better at this. Thank you, everybody, for taking part. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. What Mark said, it's all about learning. And I hope we all come together and we all walk away with something on our mind, something to think about, something to help us create better, to allow us to practice and perfect our craft, although I don't think any of us can ever be perfect. I don't want to be with a perfect surgeon. I want to be with a guy who's really working at it. Not sure what we're going to be talking about next time. We've had some excellent suggestions in the chat, which you can't see, but I can. And Rick made a great suggestion. So thank you all. I appreciate your time. Stay well. We'll see you, I hope, all next month. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Roundtable 360, where creatives from diverse fields and across the globe gather to discuss what's relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Roundtable 360 is brought to you by Biz Catalyst 360 and Northern Lights Publishing. Our shows are taped the last Thursday of every month at 7:30 a.m. Hawaiian time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, 6:30 p.m. London time, 19 hours 30 minutes Central European Standard Time, and whatever time that converts to, wherever you are. Please join us at http://nlb.pub/roundtable. That address is on your screen. See you next time, and until then, stay well and safe.